As we move into the 11th, 12th, and 13th centuries, the medieval world enters an age of accelerating transformation. Old powers strain under new pressures. Byzantium loses ground to Normans and Seljuks. The Islamic world fractures even as brilliant thinkers like Avicenna, Al-Ghazali, and Averroes reshape philosophy, and India becomes a battleground of empires from Ghazni to the Cholas. Across East Asia, the Song dynasty drives technological innovation while rival states rise on its borders. And in Japan, the age of the samurai begins with the fall of the Taira and the rise of the first shogunate. Europe too is in motion. The Crusades redefine the relationship between faith and warfare. Universities emerge, vernacular literature blossoms, and the great powers of England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire wrestle for dominance. Yet all of this unfolds in the shadow of a force unlike anything the world has seen before. From the steppes of Mongolia, Chinggis Khan unites the tribes and unleashes a wave of conquest that will redraw the entire Eurasian world, from China to Persia, from Russia to the gates of Europe. This is the story of a world on the brink of global connection, a world shaped by war, faith, innovation, and the rise of the largest land empire in history.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
We gather here tonight to bring women back to their rightful place.
The Testaments, a new Hulu original series from the executive producers of The Handmaid's Tale.
It's easier to accept a story than believe that the people around you are monsters.
The battle isn't over.
There comes a time when you have to take action, when you have to choose your own destiny.
Never quite as it seems.
Watch the new Hulu original series, The Testaments, streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply.
The History of the World podcast, written and presented by Chris Hasler. Volume 4, The Medieval World. Episode 98, The Medieval World Summary, Part 3. In the previous summary, we examined the events of the 11th century, a century that witnessed the end of the traditional Viking age as Viking-descended regions emerged as recognisable European states. The Byzantine Empire still dominated the Balkans from its capital at Constantinople, yet the growing presence of the Normans in Italy and the Seljuk Turks in Anatolia resulted in significant territorial losses, including several major cities. The advance of the Muslim Seljuks alarmed Christian rulers across Europe, prompting the Pope to declare a holy war. The Crusaders succeeded in capturing Jerusalem, the holy city of Christianity. And meanwhile, tensions between Rome and Constantinople culminated in a permanent schism between the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches, and the papacy's increasing power contributed to mounting political conflict between the papacy and the Holy Roman Empire. The Christian kingdoms of northern Iberia began to exploit the collapse of the Caliphate of Cordoba by reclaiming territory within the Islamic lands of Al-Andalus. Their advances continued until a powerful Islamic dynasty, the Almoravids, crossed the Strait of Gibraltar from North Africa to stabilise and consolidate what remained of Muslim-controlled Spain. Turkic peoples had originated on the Eurasian steppe in the early years of the Islamic Caliphate and had served as mercenaries to the Arabs and Persians of the Islamic world to their south. Many Turkic groups converted to Islam, and over time they grew in power, eventually coming to dominate the Abbasid Caliphate at its capital Baghdad. These were the Seljuk Turks, who seized control of Baghdad from the Buyids, a Daylamite Persian Shia Muslim dynasty. Under the Buyids, the Islamic Golden Age was still flourishing intellectually, and among its most brilliant figures was the Persian polymath Avicenna. A child prodigy, Avicenna authored around 450 works across astronomy, mathematics, medicine, philosophy, and theology. His writings bridged the intellectual traditions of Aristotelian Greek philosophy with those that later shaped the Renaissance, Europe's intellectual revival in the second millennium. Avicenna died in 1037, while Baghdad fell under Seljuk control in 1055. Turkic influence was also shaping the Indian subcontinent when the Ghaznavid ruler Mahmud of Ghazni led a Turkic army into northern India and sacked the city of Kanauj in 1018. The fall of Kanauj marked the downfall of the once powerful Gurjara Pratihara dynasty. The Ghaznavids sought to achieve two aims in northern India. First, to plunder its considerable wealth, and second, to extend Islamic influence. Both aims were symbolised by Mahmud's devastating raid on the sacred Somnath temple in Gujarat, a Hindu sign dedicated to Lord Shiva, filled with gold, jewels and holy relics. Although the Hindus rebuilt the Somnath temple with resilience and devotion, Mahmud's raid opened the way for a lasting Islamic presence in the region, paving the path to the emergence of the Delhi Sultanate in the early 13th century. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the subcontinent, the Cholas undertook their celebrated Gangetic expedition under the leadership of Emperor Rajendra Chola. It is often described as one of the most extraordinary achievements in medieval Indian history, spanning the entire length of the subcontinent. The Chola army marched northeast from their homeland in modern Tamil Nadu, through Kalinga and other kingdoms, and into Bengal, defeating several local rulers. The Cholas sought to demonstrate their capacity to project power deep into northern India by symbolically carrying the sacred waters of the Ganges River back to their heartlands. This act served as a warning to any northern polity that harboured ambitions of regional dominance. The Cholas were not to be underestimated. Although unable to subdue the northern territories of China, the Song dynasty maintained influence over the south and much of the north. Despite political instability, China continued to advance technologically. The 11th century saw Bi Sheng invent movable type printing, revolutionising the reproduction of texts. Individual Chinese characters could be arranged and rearranged to create unique templates for multiple printings and then reused for entirely new documents, a far more efficient system than traditional woodblock printing. The Khitan Liao dynasty continued to dominate Mongolia and Manchuria, hindering the Song dynasty's ambitions to expand northwards. Meanwhile, a Tibetan-speaking people known as the Tanguts, long settled in the frontier regions of northwestern China, saw their leader proclaim himself emperor of the Western Xia dynasty in 1038. This declaration asserted their sovereignty over the region between the Yellow River and the Gobi Desert, a strategically crucial location along the Silk Road. As a result, the Tanguts were able to exert control over key trade routes used by both the Liao and the Song. In Japan, around the year 1020, a noblewoman and lady-in-waiting named Murasaki Shikibu completed a literary work called The Tale of Genji. She composed it over several years, producing 54 chapters that depicted the life and romantic pursuits of the nobleman Hikaru Genji. The work was widely recognized as a literary masterpiece and is today considered the world's first novel. To the south, in Southeast Asia, the first Burmese national state was founded at Pagan, in what is now Myanmar. Pagan unified smaller principalities, centralized authority, and embraced Theravada Buddhism as its state religion. All of this was achieved under the leadership of King Anoyata around the year 1044. 1100. During the 12th century, the advancement of human technology became increasingly visible to history. Literate societies were not only discovering more of the world's lesser-known cultures, but were also capable of documenting their findings in ways that allowed later generations to tell accurate stories about many more peoples. This era permitted the celebration of individual achievement, not merely in political or spiritual realms, but in artistic, philosophical, and literary spheres as well. We have already explored the advances in printing technology and the emergence of the first known written novel in the Far East before this century. Yet it should not be assumed that significant literary works did not exist before the 12th century, nor only in familiar centres such as Europe or the Middle East. It is believed that during the late 9th or early 10th century, the Mataram kingdom of central Java, on the island forming part of modern Indonesia, composed its own version of the Hindu Ramayana, originally a Sanskrit epic from India. The old Javanese Ramayana blended Hindu themes with indigenous mythology and now stands as a cornerstone of classical Javanese literature. One of the most influential Muslim theologians lived at the turn of the 12th century. Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, a Persian scholar of the Seljuk period, worked to reconcile Islamic orthodoxy with philosophy, helping to define and shape the future of Sunni theology. His writings influenced not only Muslim thinkers but also Christian and Jewish philosophers. Around the same time, the Persian polymath Omar Khayyam composed the Rubaiyat, a poetic reflection on themes such as the fleeting nature of life and humanity's place in the universe. His work is said to have inspired later figures from T.S. Eliot to Salvador Dali. Elsewhere in the Muslim world, the Arab philosopher Averroes was born in Córdoba around 1126. He became renowned for his extensive commentaries on Aristotle, which profoundly shaped both Islamic philosophy and Western medieval thought. Frequently in history, we see that the most innovative thinkers are ahead of their time and that the conservative world around them is ill prepared for their ideas. Socrates, Galileo, and Charles Darwin all faced hostility for their views before ultimately being embraced by mainstream thought. Averroes himself was exiled for his philosophical positions by the Almohads, successors to the Almoravids in Morocco and Muslim Spain. After his death, his writings were translated into Latin and Hebrew, inspiring the rise of Averroism, a philosophical movement that gained popularity during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. It was during this period that the first European universities emerged. Bologna in Italy, traditionally regarded as the oldest university in the Western world, dates to 1088. Teaching began at the university town of Oxford in England in 1096, while the University of Paris evolved out of the Cathedral School of Notre Dame during the 12th century. These institutions gradually replaced the cathedral schools and monastic centres that had previously dominated European learning. Until the 12th century, Latin remained the preferred language for European poets, but during this period there was a flourishing of texts written in the vernacular languages such as Middle English, Old French, and Middle High German. This development meant that poetry and storytelling became accessible to audiences unfamiliar with Latin and could resonate with people in their own spoken languages. Two of the most renowned early vernacular works were created in the 14th century: Dante's Divine Comedy, an allegorical epic written in Tuscan Italian, and Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, a frame narrative comprising multiple stories written in Middle English. On a political level, in Europe, the Germans continued to harbour eastward ambitions, which created ongoing tension between them and their Slavic neighbours, an issue stretching back to the formation of both East Francia and the early Slavic states. As East Francia evolved into the Holy Roman Empire, it was ruled through the 11th and 12th centuries by monarchs of the Salian dynasty. The last Salian ruler, Henry V, died without a direct male heir, prompting the German princes to elect Lothar of Supplinburg as Lothar III, King of the Romans. His accession initiated a more assertive push into Slavic territory. Western settlers gradually filtered into Slavic lands, a movement that contributed to varying degrees of Germanization. This process was not always imposed through military conquest. It could also take place through peaceful settlement, integration, or modernization, often with the intent of Christianizing pagan Slavic communities. The expansion of the Teutonic Knights into the Baltic regions was framed as a series of Christian crusades. Over time, language, law, and administrative systems transformed the eastern frontier, leaving a lasting cultural legacy. In Western Europe, the accession of Henry II to the English throne in 1154 and his marriage to Eleanor of Aquitaine placed him in control of a vast realm stretching from the Scottish border in the north to the Pyrenees in the south, encompassing England and large portions of western France. His succession ended the civil war that had plagued England, and his legal reforms laid the foundations of modern English jurisprudence. Yet tensions continued in the French territories of his Angevin Empire, driven by the complex nature of feudal landholding and overlapping claims. Representatives of Henry II and the Capetian kings of France clashed periodically as both dynasties sought to assert dominance. This was an age in which the ideal of the Crusades united rulers and nobles from England, France, Germany, and various other Christian lands, even when they found themselves in political conflict with one another. Patronage of grand architectural projects, such as the construction of the magnificent Chartres Cathedral, funded in part by Louis IX of France, reflected the religious ideals of the High Middle Ages. Chartres had been a major pilgrimage site since the 9th century. Work on the present cathedral began in the mid-12th century, and the great Gothic structure seen today was erected following a devastating fire in 1194. It stands as one of the finest masterpieces of French Gothic architecture. The Crusader states in the Middle East, established after the First Crusade, suffered from internal rivalries and ineffective leadership. In contrast, towards the end of the 12th century, Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria, united much of the Muslim world under his rule. He forged a disciplined and motivated army inspired by the ideal of jihad to reclaim Jerusalem. At the Battle of Hattin in 1187, Saladin destroyed the Crusader forces, capturing most of the Frankish nobility and seizing the true cross, Christianity's holiest relic. He rapidly captured many other Crusader-held cities, including Jerusalem, which surrendered later that same year. Frankish power in the region was reduced to a vulnerable coastal strip, and the triumphs of the First Crusade were effectively undone. Earlier, we mentioned the Almohads in connection with Averroes, the philosopher of Cordoba. Originating in the Atlas Mountains of North Africa, the Almohads condemned the ruling Almoravid dynasty as corrupt and insufficiently devout. By 1135, they had established control over much of Morocco, and within a few decades they expanded across North Africa and into Al-Andalus. This marked a new era of political unity and centralization in the Western Islamic world. In 1175, Muhammad Ghori, governor of Ghazni, launched his first major campaign into the Indian subcontinent. He successfully captured Multan in present-day Pakistan, bringing the region under the authority of the Ghurid dynasty, a Sunni Muslim power. This campaign paved the way for the establishment of Muslim rule in northern India and ultimately the foundation of the Delhi Sultanate in the early 13th century. Since the 10th century, the Song dynasty had been the dominant ruling house in China. Although firmly entrenched in the south and influential across much of the north, the Song had never managed to reclaim the northern frontier territories once belonging to China, which were now held by the Khitans and the Tanguts, each declaring themselves emperors of their respective realms. A new power, the Jin dynasty, arose among the Jurchens, a Tungusic people from Manchuria. The Jin overthrew the Khitan Liao dynasty in 1115 and soon turned against the Song. In 1125, Jin armies invaded Song territory and eventually seized the imperial capital Kaifeng. The Song emperor and his son were taken hostage and never returned. The Jin consolidated control over the entire northern region, while the remnants of the Song withdrew south of the Huai and Yangtze rivers, re-establishing their government in Hangzhou. Thereafter, China remained divided between the Jin in the north and the Song in the south. The 12th century in Japan marked the closing years of the Heian period, a time when real political authority had shifted from the imperial court to the samurai clans who controlled the provinces and their military forces. By the middle of the century, the Taira clan had risen to a position of dominance, generating resentment among rival nobles and warrior families. In 1180, Prince Mochihito, a member of the imperial family opposed to the Taira supremacy, called upon the Minamoto clan to rise in rebellion. This sparked the Genpei War, a national conflict between the two great clans. The Minamoto forces steadily drove the Taira westwards, culminating in the decisive Battle of Dan-no-ura in 1185. The Taira were utterly annihilated, leaving the Minamoto with uncontested control of Japan. This enabled them to establish a military government, the Kamakura shogunate, marking the beginning of the age of the shoguns. The new warrior elite were drawn to the discipline and experimental focus of Zen Buddhism. The teachings of the monk Eisai, who introduced Rinzai Zen from China, helped entrench Zen as a major Buddhist tradition in Japan, profoundly influencing Japanese religion, culture, and aesthetic sensibilities. The Khmer Empire had flourished in Southeast Asia since its emergence in the 9th century in the region of present-day Cambodia. Initially, it embraced Hinduism imported from the Indian subcontinent. Around 1150, King Suryavarman II constructed Angkor Wat, a Hindu temple dedicated to Vishnu. Although it later became a Buddhist shrine, it remains one of the world's most magnificent monuments to spiritual and artistic devotion. By roughly 1180, the Khmer Empire had reached its greatest territorial extent under King Chayawarman VII, who dominated much of mainland Southeast Asia. A devout Mahayana Buddhist, Chayawarman transformed Angkor into a resplendent capital adorned with temples, reservoirs, roads, hospitals, and rest houses. The Srivijaya Kingdom of maritime Southeast Asia was also a major centre of Mahayana Buddhism. Its prosperity stemmed from its command of the sea lanes linking India, China, and the Spice Islands, making it a thriving hub of commerce, culture, and religious learning. Its golden age stretched from the 7th to the 11th century, but by the latter half of the 12th century, Srivijaya was past its zenith and facing increasing challenges from rival regional powers. Its decline would become more evident by the mid-13th century. In the region of modern Mexico, the Toltecs had established their capital at Tula, which reached its height as the dominant political and military centre of the Toltec world between the 10th and 12th centuries. It was during the 12th century that their power began to wane. Although there are no contemporary written records, it is widely believed that internal conflict, combined with external pressures, contributed to the fall of Tula. One leading theory suggests that the Chichimek peoples from the north invaded the region, overwhelming the Toltecs and precipitating the city's decline. The dispersal of Toltec elites and peoples following the collapse of Tula appears to have had a major influence on other Mesoamerican cultures, most notably in the Maya world, particularly at Chichen Itza, where Toltec architectural and artistic motifs are clearly evident. In later Aztec legend, the exiled Toltec ruler Topiltzin-Quetzalcoatl became an enduring symbol of moral authority and divine kingship. By the 12th century, Pueblo culture in North America had reached its height. Chaco Canyon in northern New Mexico served as a major ceremonial and administrative centre, featuring impressive multi-story constructions such as Pueblo Bonito, which contained hundreds of rooms and ceremonial chambers. In the region of modern Colorado, communities at Mesa Verde began building elaborate cliff dwellings in sheltered alcoves, demonstrating sophisticated masonry and strategic planning. Tens of thousands of people lived within interlinked settlements across the wider Four Corners region, where the modern states of New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Arizona converge. 1200. If we were writing newspaper headlines about world history in the 13th century, the dominant subject would undoubtedly be the Mongols. Historians frequently describe this century as the Age of the Mongols, for their sweeping campaigns reshaped the entire Eurasian landmass, creating the largest contiguous empire in history and linking China, Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe through trade, conquest, and cultural exchange. The origins of the Mongol Empire lie in the year 1206, when the Mongol tribes of the Central Asian steppe were unified into a single disciplined confederation under their proclaimed leader, Chinggis Khan. At first, Mongol expansion focused on the Tangut Western Xia dynasty and the Jurchen Jin dynasty in northern China. This campaign led to the capture of Zhongdu, modern-day Beijing, in 1215. By 1219, Chinggis Khan had turned westward against the Khwarezmian Empire, devastating the cities of Samarkand and Bukhara. These conquests shattered long-established powers and opened new channels for commerce and cultural encounter across Eurasia. Initially, the Mongols lacked the power to overcome the Jin dynasty in northern China, but by 1234 they had forged an alliance with the Qin's southern enemies, the Song. Together, the Mongols and the Song captured Tsai Prefecture, prompting the last Jin emperor to commit suicide. The Jin dynasty collapsed, bringing all of northern China under Mongol control. The Song soon realised that their alliance had backfired, for they now faced Mongol pressure themselves. After a council in 1235, Chenghis Khan's grandson, Batu Khan, led Mongol armies westward, launching the conquest of Kievan Rus in 1237. The Mongols employed swift cavalry manoeuvres, sophisticated siege techniques and fearsome psychological warfare to overwhelm the fractured and quarrelling Rus principalities. They went on to establish the Golden Horde, which ruled over Russian lands and exacted tribute from their princes. In 1241, Mongol expansion reached Central Europe as armies under Batu Khan and his brilliant general Subutai swept westwards. The Mongols crushed Polish and German forces at the Battle of Liegnitz and destroyed the Hungarian army at the Battle of Mohi, spreading terror across Christendom. Just as Europe braced for complete invasion, the Mongols suddenly withdrew following the death of the great Khan Ugadai in Mongolia. Another grandson of Chenghis Khan, Hulagu Khan, commanded a vast force in a broader campaign to subdue the Islamic world. Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, became a principal target. Despite warnings, the Caliph refused to surrender, prompting the Mongols to besiege the city in 1258. After breaking through its defences, the Mongols massacred hundreds of thousands, razing libraries, mosques and hospitals. They burned the House of Wisdom, a renowned centre of learning, and executed the Caliph, bringing an end to the Abbasid Caliphate, which had endured since 750. Islamic authority shifted to Cairo, where a symbolic caliphate would later be re-established under Mamluk protection. From the ruins, a Mongol successor state, the Ilkhanate, emerged in Persia and Mesopotamia. The Mamluks were a military caste of former slave soldiers, predominantly of Kipchak Turkic origin, who had seized power in Egypt. After the sack of Baghdad, the Mongols overran much of the Middle East. In 1260, the Mamluks confronted them at Ain Jalut in northern Palestine and achieved a decisive victory, halting the Mongol advance. This was the first major open-field defeat the Mongols had ever suffered. It preserved Islamic civilization in the region and demonstrated that Mongol armies were not invincible. The Mongols would never again pose a serious threat to Egypt. A 4-year Mongol civil war saw Kublai Khan defeat his brother for supremacy in 1264. Kublai became Great Khan, though his legitimacy was not universally accepted across the empire. He shifted the Mongol capital from Karakorum in Mongolia to Khambalik, the contemporary name for Beijing, signalling the creation of a new dynasty blending Mongol and Chinese traditions. In 1271, Kublai Khan formally proclaimed the Yuan dynasty to legitimize his rule over China. The consolidation of Yuan authority culminated in the conquest of the Song dynasty in 1279. In 1274, Kublai Khan launched the first Mongol invasion of Japan, sending a fleet from Korea carrying tens of thousands of troops. They landed on the island of Kyushu and engaged in fierce battles with the samurai defenders. After a full day of fighting, a sudden storm struck the Mongol fleet, sinking many ships and forcing a retreat. The Japanese regarded this as divine intervention and referred to the storm as a kamikaze, meaning a divine wind. Our knowledge of Kublai Khan's politics, technologies and customs is strengthened by the accounts of a Venetian merchant, Marco Polo, who reached Kublai Khan's court in 1275 after travelling across Persia and Central Asia. European perceptions of China's wealth and sophistications were influenced heavily by Marco Polo's writings. He would have had direct knowledge of the Yuan conquest of the Song in 1279. The Yuan dynasty became the first non-native dynasty to rule all of China, with the Mongols adopting many established Chinese bureaucratic methods. In 1281, Kublai Khan attempted a second invasion of Japan, this time assembling a force even larger than the first. On this occasion, a powerful typhoon struck the Mongol armada, destroying thousands of ships and ending the invasion attempt. The Japanese had prepared stronger coastal defences in anticipation of a renewed assault. But whereas the storm of 1274 had played a role in undermining the Mongols, this typhoon proved catastrophic. Once again, the Japanese credited their salvation to a divine kamikaze. Mongol invasions of the Bagan kingdom, the Burmese state established in the 9th century, began in the late 1270s after repeated refusals by Bagan to pay tribute. In 1277 and 1287, the Mongols launched several campaigns, capturing northern border regions and briefly occupying certain areas. However, strong Burmese defences prevented them from advancing fully into the Bagan heartland. The Mongols attempted further invasions after 1287, but Burmese forces successfully resisted them and inflicted heavy casualties, forcing a Mongol withdrawal. Despite this military resilience, the Bagan kingdom fragmented soon afterwards.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You know those friends who support your preference for podcasts over music on road trips? That's the energy State Farm brings to insurance. With over 19,000 local agents, they help you find the coverage that fits your needs, so you can spend less time worrying about insurance and more time enjoying the ride. Download the State Farm app or go online at statefarm.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the History of the World podcast. It was the third of our 4-part series summarising the medieval world and the fascinating 13th century of the Mongols. We was able to bring that in at the end, and next time we'll be looking at the aftermath of that. So, great period of history to discuss and to contemplate, and I'm glad we all got to enjoy it together. Now, very important, if you enjoy the podcast and you would like to support the podcast, then please do visit our website, click on the Patreon link and sign up to make a monthly contribution. You can do that for as little as $1 a month. You will become a lifelong member of the History of the World podcast Illuminati. And you can follow the podcast on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Tumblr, Threads and Mastodon. But very important that we mention the fact that we're now actually having a tournament on social media, particularly on Facebook and X, to decide what the name of Volume 5 should be. And we're getting to the closing stages. So if you haven't been to the History of the World podcast Facebook page, the History of the World podcast fan page, the unofficial fan page on Facebook, or you don't follow us on X, then do please consider getting involved and casting your vote. You could be the pivotal vote in deciding what Volume 5 will be called. As ever, I am very keen to hear your feedback, so I do strongly encourage you, please, to drop me a line at historyoftheworldpodcast@mail.com. Your feedback will be discussed during our History of the World podcast debrief episodes, of which I plan to publish one before the end of the year. So there's plenty of listening material coming your way. So next will be our final episode of the volume, episode 99, and it will be part 4 of the 4-part summary. So we've just stopped shy of 100, haven't we? We've just stopped shy of 100 episodes, just the way it's worked out. That's just the way it goes. However, if I'm honest, I think if we include the episode about Rome and Greece and the episode about the Emirate of Granada, which were both episodes commissioned by History of the World podcast Illuminati members who had reached that threshold, then it is actually 101 episodes once we've completed the 99th episode, the part 4 of the 4 parts about the summary of the medieval world. But that's for next time. Until then, thanks very much for listening, and of course, be good.
The History of the World podcast, written and presented by Chris Hasler. Please consider making a financial contribution by going to the historyoftheworldpodcast.com website and clicking on the Patreon link. Email the show at historyoftheworldpodcast@mail.com. And don't forget to join our social media at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Tumblr. See you next time.